I'm always uneasy doing this, improvising, because I'm so inarticulate, unless I write it all down, but then that gets a little arch after a while. I have been, it's always stuck in the back of my head, and I've been listening to a bunch of stuff about China and all this boohoo stuff about, oh, our empire is falling. Who cares? I mean, unless you want to continue to be an empire, it doesn't really do much of us any good. It certainly hasn't kept the price of food and stuff down, has it? It hasn't cleaned up the environment. It hasn't stopped any wars. So you'll not find me mourning the end of empire. But there's a long discussion by people who've written lots of books and got lots of letters after their name. And just by the by, I'm not essentially, existentially an enemy of these people. I just point to their lack of success. That's it. And would suggest that we listen elsewhere. We listen to other kinds of people. We develop other kinds of. We certainly need to get rid of these stupid books, and the books written about the books. The endless number of books written based on the big three of monotheism. And I often get into this thing when I discuss the world in terms of how other societies and other cultures have dealt with modernity, which one community largely created, and I always end up not naturally. I think it's a narrowness, and it may even be a sort of biblical narrowness. There's only two. In other words, there's us and there's Islam. And that's where we fixate. So if I say something about colonialism, somebody will talk about the European colonialism. Someone will say, "Oh, well, the Ottoman Empire and what the Arabs did in Africa," and I'm fine. Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Islam is a Western cult, like Christianity is a Western cult. And as they say themselves, they are all sons of Abraham. Abe's got a lot to answer for. But these are belief systems that people choose. They're not essential to them. They choose them, and my feelings about the human race are the people before their choices, or the more organic choices that other civilizations have made. They're still with us, hanging on in spite of all our attempts to finalize the extermination, the final solution. But the thing about listening to this particular very erudite and scholarly discussion about the end of us is why nobody addresses the reality that the Chinese are not a monotheism. They don't essentially believe in God. Now, I'm not living in China. I don't know a vast number of Chinese people. But in almost every platform, Bet Media, one of the excellent ones, but everywhere people avoid this concept. They'll talk, well, there's cultural differences and there's, economic differences, and there's some people have more raw materials than others, and some people live in arid areas, and all of these explanations, except for the one most blatant and obvious one. And part of the things that I get into is what is the relationship, not between Jesus. Jesus was but a stepping stone in a sense, maybe a hugely profound one. I can't really say. I don't study those things. But Christianity culturally and what it does, as it must do, as these belief systems must do. And as I say, I don't know Taoism or Confucianism, and I know very little about Buddhism, but on paper, they involve a lot less magical thinking. So, one of the problems that you have in a place like the United States is one forgets the extremely turbulent rivers of faith that run through it. And this faith is evidence free. It's a fantasy. It's made up. And I really don't have any problems with things that are made up and are fantasies, except when people start to deal with them as the same way you deal with common sense facts. They're not. It's always been my thing. Is that my objection to any religion is not its magical qualities, its mumbo jumbos and stuff like that. I love the mumbo and the jumbo. I do. All that Christmas and all of those sorts of things. What I object to is when people start to tell me that this is some level of reality. Therefore, you've got an American culture that has convinced itself over hundreds of years, and you hear it at every wretched inauguration, this trotting out of the fact that we are God's chosen people. We are special. We are exceptional. And the obstacle that places in front of the possibilities of progress are so massive and so blatant. So anyway, I don't know whether the Confucianism and Taoism lends itself to the kind of lifestyle, the lives that communists would lead. In other words, that it's not so individualistic. I find nothing individualistic in the Abrahamic traditions at all. It's just it looks that way because there's so many of them are so selfish. So I can't say, and I would say also I have no idea how I would find it. I might find myself bucking and tearing at the bit against living in China. I can't say, you know what I mean? I just can't. I just think that the myths of Christianity, the myths, not the mumbo jumbo, but the myths that sustain us, the ones about this ridiculous notion of meritocracy. Meritocracy is its own reward. If you are talented, that is its own reward, dears. It just is. Otherwise, you're going to fake it, which is what you largely do. Look at Hollywood. So that mythology, that idea that because it's backloaded. In other words, if you become Elon Musk and rich, you begin to think that I must merit this. And people who crave what you have and who therefore go to the universities and adopt his mannerisms and things like that, and there are millions of them, and argue with people like me saying, oh, you're just jealous of him, when nothing could be further from the truth. Merit being backloaded, in other words, I am virtuous because I'm rich, etc., etc., etc. And it's just mindless. It's so uninteresting. So the conclusion of that part of what I was trying to say today is that if China is coming, and every member of the paranoid US state is telling me that it's coming, if it's coming, it's not going to be the same thing. There's a great discussion about the Mongols and the Han, the Attila and Genghis Khan and people like that. They had a completely different relationship. They were kings, Khans. They had a completely different relationship to what you would think of as God. They weren't God anointed. There is a big difference between how we have learned to conceive of leadership through our tradition of anointed kings and how the real East, in other words, not Persia, responds to organization and the questions of human life. And just a thing to add, I was listening to Sabi Sabs, and she was in turn focusing on a Brianna Joy Gray discussion about third parties with Marianne Williamson and some other guy who just wanted to interrupt. And I realized the thing that I've known all my life, but I've sort of been what's the kind of the dishonorable discharge. I've been a dishonorable member of the Democrat community, and I thought I belonged to it, and I don't. It doesn't mean I belong to the other one, God knows, but I don't belong to it. And I realized how tribal it was, and how the arguments against a third party are totally tribal. And the assumption is, when they speak to me, is that I have the same values that they do. And I'm going, well, what are those values? Genocide? Millionaire courtship? The American meritocracy, capitalism. You've failed so miserably on things like healthcare and universal education and stuff like that. So you're going to have to explain to me, apart from the fact that you think I like you, or I need you to like me, or that you speak a certain way, which I don't speak. I don't talk like you. You explain that to me. And so Sabrina and Brianna, both black women, are basically saying, you've done nothing. And it's true. It's absolutely true. So again, the usefulness of monotheistic mythology, all you have done is to devilize the Republicans, and they need demonizing. They're fine to be demonized. They're demonization candidates number one. Look at their behaviors. However, I live in a world of more than two. I'm a pagan. I live in a world much more complicated than yours and much more interesting. So you, as Ali said, you my enemy. And I say that with all due respect and love, etc., etc. I'm just me, and that is no longer a connection that I can make automatically. Do something about the environment. Please do. I've not seen any warning signs, because when it comes, it's going to be like a hammer when you say to everybody in the country, okay, carbon zero. All them trucks got to go. All of them, right? It's not going to make much difference, the Tesla world, idiots. It's not going to make that much difference. To make a difference, Democrats, in terms of the environment, you're going to have to say public transportation. You're going to have to walk to the bus stop. Do it, say it, raise the minimum wage, Joe Biden, you wimp. And if you wanted to codify Roe versus Wade, you've had at least 5 opportunities since that was created, and you didn't do it, did you? So explain that to me.